The world doesn't reward fairness. It rewards power, confidence, and the ability to play the game most people don't even realize is happening. You could be the smartest, kindest, hardest working person in the room, and still get ignored, walked over, and forgotten. That's the brutal truth no one likes to admit. I know this because I lived it. For years, I thought doing everything right would eventually get me noticed. I stayed polite, dependable, and fair, and yet nothing changed. The louder, bolder, more ruthless people always seemed to get ahead. At first, I thought they were just lucky, but then I started paying closer attention, and what I saw changed everything. There are rules hidden in plain sight. Rules so old they've been written about for centuries. Rules powerful people live by, while the rest of us play by illusions. Once you see them, you can't unsee them, and if you don't learn to use them, someone else will use them against you. So today, we're diving into 8 dangerous truths from the mind of Machiavelli. Principles that might seem harsh, but explain exactly why some people rise and others stay stuck. Understand them, and you'll never see power, respect, or influence the same way again. We're told since childhood to play fair. Share your toys, wait your turn, do the right thing, and people will do the same for you. It sounds beautiful, but in reality, fairness is an illusion. In the real world, fairness only works when both sides respect it. But here's the catch. People with power use fairness as a tool, not a rule. They'll demand fairness when it benefits them and abandon it the second it doesn't. Think about the workplace. 2 people work equally hard, but one is bolder, more visible, and knows how to position themselves. Guess who gets promoted? Not the quiet, hard-working one. It's the person who understands that perception beats fairness every time. Or look at relationships. You might give, compromise, and bend over backward, thinking fairness will keep things balanced. But often, the person who sets stronger boundaries, the one who isn't afraid to say no, gets more respect. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote that people who rely on fairness will always be controlled by those who don't, because fairness assumes everyone plays by the same rules. But powerful people don't play by rules, they write them. And here's the dangerous part. Once you realize fairness is a trap, you start to see how often it's been used to keep you in line. But if fairness is a trap, what replaces it? What do you build your power on instead? The answer begins with ruthlessness. When people hear the word ruthless, they picture cruelty, cold-hearted villains who step on everyone to get ahead. But that's not what real ruthlessness means. True ruthlessness isn't about being cruel. It's about mastering your emotions so they don't control you. Most people react. They get angry and lash out. They get anxious and freeze. They get flattered and give in. And every time they do, someone else takes control of the situation. But the ruthless person, they don't react. They respond, calmly, strategically, with precision. Imagine a heated confrontation. One person is shouting, red-faced, desperate to win. The other stands silent, measured, unshaken. Who actually has the power in that moment? Not the one screaming, it's the one in control. Because silence and composure are far more intimidating than noise. Ruthlessness means you don't let emotions decide for you. You can feel them, but you don't obey them. Anger becomes information, not instructions. Fear becomes a signal, not a stop sign. Even kindness becomes a choice, not a weakness. That's what Machiavelli meant when he warned leaders against being ruled by compassion alone. Because compassion without discipline makes you exploitable. And here's the paradox. The more disciplined you are, the freer you become. While others get tossed around by emotions, you stay steady. And in that steadiness, people start to notice something different about you. They sense power, but ruthlessness is only one side of control. The other is clarity of purpose, and that's where the next principle strikes. Most people drift. They chase approval, chase money, chase status. without a deeper plan. That's why they get manipulated so easily. But the dangerous truth is this: the person with a clear vision bends those without it. Power naturally flows to direction. Machiavelli understood that people crave guidance, even if they pretend they don't. A leader with certainty can move crowds, while a hesitant person loses influence, even in their own home. Think about someone who always seems to know where they're going. Their decisions may not always be right, but their confidence makes others follow. Vision creates momentum, and momentum creates power. The tragedy is that most people never define what they truly want. They live by other people's maps. The ruthless, however, cut through the noise and draw their own. And once you have clarity, indecision vanishes. And so does manipulation. Because when you know your path, distractions lose their grip. But vision alone isn't enough. It must be paired with presence, because direction without presence is invisible. Machiavelli once asked a timeless question: is it better to be loved or feared? His answer wasn't simple. He said it's safest to be both. But if you must choose, it's better to be feared. Not fear in the sense of terror, but in the sense of presence. Presence is what makes people pause when you enter a room. It's the invisible authority that makes others second-guess before they cross you. And here's the truth: you don't get presence by trying to please everyone. You get it by drawing boundaries and holding them. Picture two friends. One is endlessly accommodating, always available, always agreeable. The other has limits. They're supportive, yes, but they have standards for how they're treated. Who do you rely on more when things truly matter? The one with boundaries. Because presence is built on respect, not on endless availability. Presence doesn't mean being loud or dominating every conversation. Often it's the opposite. It's controlled silence. It's saying less, but meaning every word. It's showing you won't be pulled into every game or argument. Presence is authority without effort. But presence alone isn't enough. If you have presence but you never act, your authority dissolves. That's why the next principle is critical, because decisive action turns presence into power. There's nothing more destructive to authority than hesitation. People forgive mistakes more than they forgive indecision, because when you hesitate, you invite doubt. And once people doubt you, your presence collapses. Think about someone who constantly threatens consequences but never follows through. If you're late again, but nothing happens. Next time I won't, but they always do. Over time, those words become meaningless. Empty warnings destroy credibility. Now compare that to the person who speaks once and acts immediately. They don't warn 10 times. They set a line, and when it's crossed, they act. Suddenly, people take them seriously. They don't need to yell or argue. Their authority comes from the certainty that their words have weight. Psychologically, this is powerful. Our brains are wired to trust consistency. If someone's actions always match their words, we start believing them, even fearing disappointing them. That's authority built on follow-through. Decisive action isn't about aggression, it's about clarity. It's about showing people that when you say something, you mean it. That's how presence transforms into leadership. But even decisive action has a hidden layer. Because action is only half the game, the other half is perception. And perception, once shaped, becomes reality. The first few seconds you meet someone decide almost everything. Before you speak, before you explain who you are, people have already judged you. And once that impression is made, it's nearly impossible to erase. That's the brutal efficiency of the human brain. Snap judgments keep us alive, but they also trap us. Think about two performers stepping onto a stage. One is introduced as a rising star, dressed sharply, carrying themselves with confidence. The other, equally talented, stumbles onto the stage with no introduction, slouched posture and hesitant movements. Who will the audience believe in more before a single note is played? It's not about talent. It's about perception. And here's the Machiavellian truth. Perception creates reality. If you don't control the story people tell themselves about you, they'll write their own version, and it probably won't favor you. That's why powerful people obsess over first impressions. Every word, every glance, every silence is intentional. But perception isn't just surface level. It doesn't stop at clothes or posture. It digs deeper into the stories people tell themselves about who you are. And that brings us to the next principle, one of Machiavelli's most dangerous insights. Perception is reality. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few know what you are." And those words cut to the core of power. Because people don't act on truth, they act on belief. They don't follow reality, they follow perception. A leader doesn't have to be the strongest, the smartest, or the most capable. They only need to appear that way. A rival doesn't have to destroy you directly. They only need to make others believe you've already lost. Perception becomes the battlefield, and reality follows. Think about social media. Success isn't always about actual wealth, but the appearance of wealth. Influence isn't about wisdom, but about the perception of authority. People buy into appearances first, and only later, if ever, do they question the truth. The same happens in everyday life. You may be skilled, hardworking, and trustworthy, but if your image tells a different story, hesitant, apologetic, unsure, people won't see the truth. They'll see the perception and act accordingly. That's why mastering perception is non-negotiable. Because the person who controls appearances doesn't just control how others see them, they control how others act around them. And once you control perception, you control reality. But the story doesn't stop there. Because it's not just how people see you, it's the narrative you craft about yourself. The story others repeat when you're not in the room. And if you don't write that story, someone else will, and you might not like the ending. Power isn't just about what you do, it's about how the world interprets it. Every action you take can be framed in two ways. One that weakens you and one that strengthens you. And the difference isn't the action itself. It's the story surrounding it. Imagine ending a toxic friendship. If you don't control the narrative, others might say you are cold, selfish, or disloyal. But if you shape the story, suddenly it looks different. You're protecting your energy, choosing growth, refusing to tolerate disrespect. Same action, opposite perception. And guess which one earns respect? Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew people are guided less by facts than by the stories they believe. The truth doesn't matter if the narrative is stronger, and the person who crafts the narrative controls the battlefield before the fight even begins. That's why powerful people don't just act. They frame their actions. They plant explanations, they guide perceptions, they tell the story before anyone else can. Because if you stay silent, the world will write the story for you, and you may not like the version they choose. But here's the twist. Controlling the story isn't about endless spin or manipulation. It's about alignment, making sure your actions, your words, and your image all tell the same tale. When they do, your power compounds. When they don't, you look like a contradiction, and contradictions lose trust fast. Still, there's a deeper level most people miss. Because even if you control the story, there's something even stronger than narrative. Something that removes the need to argue, explain, or justify at all. And that is the power of systems. Emotions are unpredictable. They flare up, cool down, and change with the wind. But systems? Systems are iron. They enforce themselves without you lifting a finger. And this is where true authority lies. Take someone who's always late. If you respond emotionally every time, shouting, nagging, threatening, it loses impact. People tune you out. But if you create a system, if you're late, the meeting starts without you. If you're late again, you're excluded. Suddenly, the consequences are automatic. No drama, no yelling. The system does the work. This is what separates fragile authority from lasting power. Systems create predictability. People know exactly what will happen if they cross the line. And when systems are consistent, they start to feel inevitable. That's how respect is built. Not through bursts of anger, but through unshakable structure. And once the system is in place, you no longer need to defend yourself with words. Silence becomes your ally. Presence becomes your weapon. Which brings us to one of Machiavelli's final, most dangerous truths: the art of silent dominance. Real authority doesn't come from shouting the loudest or throwing threats around. It comes from something far more subtle and far more terrifying. When you build systems of consequences, you take your emotions out of the equation. You don't need to beg, argue, or demand respect. People learn automatically how to treat you because the system itself enforces your value. Think about it. When you touch fire, you get burned. The fire doesn't argue with you. It doesn't warn you 5 times before it reacts. It doesn't hold grudges. It simply delivers a consequence, instantly and predictably. That's what makes fire powerful. You respect it because you know the result is inevitable. The same principle applies to psychological dominance. Most people make the mistake of turning respect into an emotional negotiation. They get angry when someone is late, complain when someone takes advantage, argue when someone ignores boundaries. But here's the problem. Emotional reactions are negotiable. People can dismiss them, manipulate them, or outlast them. A system, however, is untouchable. A system simply works, every time, without exception. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. You don't even have to enforce it directly. The system enforces itself. Imagine you're always the one organizing events, yet people constantly cancel last minute. Instead of arguing, instead of guilt-tripping, you quietly implement a new rule. Only those who confirm and show up on time get invited again. No drama, no speeches, just an invisible system that separates respect from disrespect. Suddenly, people start showing up early, not because you begged, but because your system trained them to. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. True power doesn't rely on the whims of others. A wise leader creates structures that make loyalty rewarding and disloyalty costly. Systems shift the burden from you to them. People begin to realize respecting you is easier than disrespecting you. And here's the deeper truth. Systems give you authority without effort. They make you appear calm, composed, and above the chaos, while others exhaust themselves with drama. It's the difference between a storm and a mountain. The storm screams, but eventually passes. The mountain doesn't raise its voice. It just sits in silent authority, unmovable, shaping everything around it. But what happens when you combine this systematic control with silence? That's when you reach the highest level of psychological dominance. The most dangerous power isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't the one constantly reminding everyone how tough, smart, or unshakable it is. That's the power of pretenders, those who shout to cover their weakness. True dominance is quiet. It's felt, not announced. It's the weight in the room that nobody can ignore, even though it says nothing. Think of the most powerful figures in history. They didn't spend their time proving themselves with endless words. They let results, presence, and precision speak for them. When they moved, people noticed. When they stayed silent, people wondered what they were planning. That's the essence of silent dominance. Mystery mixed with certainty. The truth is, when you declare your every intention, you give people time to resist you. But when you hold your cards close, when your moves seem invisible until they're complete, you strip away resistance. By the time others realize what you've done, the game is already over. Silent dominance doesn't mean weakness. It means control. It means being the fox who spots traps and the lion who strikes fear, seamlessly shifting between cunning and strength without warning. It means gathering information while revealing little. It means letting others brag posture and burn themselves out while you position yourself perfectly in the shadows. Imagine being in a room where everyone is talking, everyone is arguing, everyone is trying to prove their worth, and then there's you, calm, still, observing, not rushing to react, not fighting to be heard. People begin to feel it. They wonder, what is he thinking? What does she know that we don't? That tension, that mystery, is power. The key is this: real authority doesn't require explanation. The strongest presence is the one that doesn't need to demand respect because it already commands it. You don't need to tell people you're powerful when they can feel it. This is the peak of psychological dominance, not the storm that passes, not even the mountain that stands tall, but the gravity itself, the invisible force that shapes the world without ever raising its voice. And once you master this, you're no longer just playing the game. You are the game.